Close your eyes. That sounds impressive until you realize Homo erectus lasted almost 7 times longer. If human history was a 24-hour day, we've existed for about 3 hours. Homo erectus, they lasted 20 hours. Think about your own family tree, your grandparents, great-grandparents. Maybe you can trace back 5 or 6 generations. Now imagine 100,000 generations. That's Homo erectus. Mothers teaching daughters, fathers teaching sons. Knowledge passed down through more generations than our minds can truly comprehend. They weren't just surviving either. They were thriving, spreading from Africa to Asia to Europe, inventing tools that wouldn't be improved for 1,000,000 years, taming fire when other species ran from it, building communities where the elderly were cherished, not abandoned. The Guinness Book of World Records officially recognizes them as the longest surviving human species in history. No other branch of humanity even comes close. Neanderthals, 400,000 years. Homo habilis maybe 1 million, but Homo erectus, they just kept going. Here's what gets me. In those 2 million years, the Earth threw everything at them. Supervolcano eruptions that blocked out the sun. Ice ages that turned grasslands into frozen wastelands. Droughts that lasted centuries. Predators with teeth like kitchen knives. And through it all, one thought kept them going. Survive another day, then another 1,000,000 years worth of days. You know what finally got them? After 2 million years of beating every odd, outsmarting every predator, surviving every catastrophe, they disappeared around 110,000 years ago in Java, Indonesia. Not in some dramatic extinction event. They just faded away like a campfire, burning down to its last ember after keeping a family warm for countless generations. But here's the beautiful part. They didn't really die. They evolved. Some populations became Homo heidelbergensis, who became us. Their innovations, fire, tools, exploration, compassion, became the foundation of everything human. Every time you cook a meal, you're using their discovery. Every time you use a tool, you're building on their invention. Every time you care for an aging parent, you're honoring their example. 2 million years, one species, infinite lessons about what it really means to survive. And survive they did against odds that would break us in a heartbeat. 1.9 million years ago, Eastern Africa. The morning sun breaks over the Turkana Basin, painting the landscape gold. But something's different about this sunrise. For the first time in Earth's history, a creature stands fully upright to watch it, shading eyes with a hand that will someday write symphonies. This is Homo erectus, and everything is about to change. See, before this moment, our ancestors moved like compromised creatures, half ape, half human, knuckle-walking when tired, standing only when necessary. Bodies built for trees but living on the ground. They were evolutionary rough drafts trying to figure out what they wanted to be. But Homo erectus, they knew exactly what they were. Stand up straight. Look at your body right now. That posture, that spine curve, those long legs, that's their gift to you. They were the first humans built like humans. The skeleton known as Turkana Boy tells the story. Discovered in 1984 near Lake Turkana in Kenya, this young Homo erectus died 1.6 million years ago. He was maybe 8 years old, already 5 feet tall, and would have reached 6 feet as an adult. But he is what made archaeologists gasp. His body proportions were essentially modern. Long legs for walking, narrow pelvis for efficient movement, shorter arms that no longer needed to grasp branches. This wasn't just cosmetic evolution. This was a revolution. Standing upright freed their hands completely. Not sometimes, not mostly, always. Hands free to carry tools, food, babies. Hands free to gesture, point, communicate. Hands free to become the instruments of intelligence. Their skulls tell another story. Earlier humans had tiny brains around 400 cm 32. While furry predators overheated, Homo erectus could chase prey for hours under the African sun. Recent discoveries from Ethiopia pushed their origins back even further. The Melka Kunture site revealed Homo erectus tools from 2 million years ago. Think about that. The moment they could stand, they were innovating. The moment they could walk, they were exploring. The moment they became human, they started changing the world. But maybe the biggest change was invisible. Inside their throats, the larynx was dropping. The tongue was becoming flexible. The breathing control necessary for speech was developing. They couldn't talk like us yet. But for the first time, the machinery for language was being assembled. Standing upright seems so simple. We do it every day without thinking. But for Homo erectus, it was the key that unlocked everything. It was the difference between being another extinct ape and becoming the ancestors of everyone reading this. The day Homo erectus stood up was the day humanity began. Dmanisi, Georgia, 1.77 million years ago. Winter is coming to the Caucasus Mountains, and an old man is dying. Not from predators, not from cold, from time itself. His teeth are gone, all except one stubborn canine that hangs on like a monument to better days. His jaw has resorbed, shrinking where tooth roots once anchored. Chewing is impossible in this harsh landscape where survival means processing tough meat and fibrous plants. He should have starved years ago, but he didn't. He lived for years after losing his teeth. This old man survived because his community refused to let him die. Think about what that means. Someone, probably many people, took time from their own survival to process his food, mashing meat with stones, softening plants with water, maybe even chewing food for him, the way mothers do for babies, day after day, season after season for years. This wasn't charity, this was love. The skull, designated D34444, was discovered in 2005, but its implications still shake archaeologists. This is the earliest evidence of compassionate care in the human fossil record, earlier than Neanderthals, earlier than any other human species. Nearly 2 million years ago, Homo erectus had already discovered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't muscle or brain size. We were taking care of each other. Let me paint you a picture of Dmanisi. This wasn't paradise. Winter temperatures dropped below freezing. Saber-toothed cats hunted in packs. Giant hyenas could crack bones like we crack peanuts. Food was scarce, competition fierce. Every calorie mattered, yet they kept him alive. This toothless elder who couldn't hunt, couldn't gather efficiently, couldn't even process his own food. By any cold evolutionary calculation, he was a burden. Resources spent on him were resources not spent on healthy hunters or fertile females or growing children. But Homo erectus didn't make cold calculations. They made human ones. What did he offer that was worth such dedication? We can only guess. Maybe he knew where water flowed in drought years. Maybe he could predict weather from cloud patterns. Maybe he told stories that kept spirits alive during brutal winters. Maybe he was simply loved. The technical analysis reveals more. The bone remodeling shows he survived at least 2 years without teeth, possibly more. The wear patterns on his remaining canine suggest he used it as a tool, probably for gripping, while others cut his food. He adapted. They adapted. Together, they proved that human survival wasn't about the fittest individual, it was about the most caring community. This challenges everything we think about survival of the fittest. Darwin never said survival of the strongest or fastest or youngest. He said survival is the most adapted, and Homo erectus adapted by developing something revolutionary: compassion as a survival strategy. The old man of Dmanisi wasn't an exception. Other Homo erectus fossils show similar care: healed, broken bones that would have required weeks of immobility, survival with crippling arthritis, recovery from injuries that would have meant certain death alone. Each skeleton tells the same story: we don't leave anyone behind. In our modern world, where we warehouse our elderly, where we measure human worth in productivity, the old man of Dmanisi reminds us of something we've forgotten: The measure of humanity isn't in our tools or our brains or our conquests. It's in how we treat those who can no longer care for themselves. Wonderwork Cave, South Africa, 1 million years ago. The sun sets over the northern cape and darkness begins its nightly conquest. But tonight is different. Tonight, for the first time in 3.8 billion years of life on Earth, darkness loses. Inside the cave, something impossible flickers. Not lightning, not wildfire. Controlled flame fed by careful hands, tended with purpose, protected like the treasure it is. Fire. The moment Homo erectus mastered fire was the moment we declared war on nature's rules. No more cowering when the sun set. No more fleeing from nocturnal predators. No more accepting that half our lives belonged to darkness. We'd stolen the sun itself. The evidence at Wonderwerk is undeniable. Ash layers 30 feet inside the cave, too far for natural fires to reach. Burned bones heated to exactly 500 degrees C. The temperature of a controlled campfire, not a wildfire. This wasn't accidental, this was mastery. But controlling fire and creating it are different beasts. The first Homo erectus probably didn't make fire from scratch. They were fire thieves, brave enough to approach nature's blazes and steal burning branches. Then came the harder part, keeping it alive. Imagine the responsibility. You're the firekeeper. If your flame dies, your family might die. No warmth in freezing nights, no protection from the eyes glowing in the darkness. No cooked food to fuel growing brains. The pressure must have been crushing. They learned which wood burned longest, which materials made the best tinder, how to bank coals to last through the night, how to transport fire across rivers and through rain. This wasn't just knowledge, it was the beginning of science. Fire changed everything about human biology. Our guts shrank because cooked food is easier to digest. That freed up calories for our brains to grow. Our teeth became smaller because we didn't need to grind raw meat. Our jaws weakened because tenderized food required less force. We literally evolved around fire. It redesigned our bodies from the inside out. But the social changes were even more profound. Fire created the first human gathering place. After dark, instead of sleeping immediately like every other animal, Homo erectus sat around flames, talking, planning, teaching, and bonding. Fire gave us time after sunset to be human. The archaeological record shows how fire spread through Homo erectus populations like, well, wildfire. Sites from Africa to Asia to Europe, all showing evidence of controlled burning. They didn't just use fire, they became masters of it. At Zhoukoudian in China, 750,000 years ago, Homo erectus maintained fires that burned for generations, ash layers 6 meters thick. That's not campfires, that's the industry. They were using fire for warmth, cooking, protection, light, and possibly even for hardening wooden tools. Here's what strikes me most. Every other animal on Earth fears fire instinctively. Flight is hardwired into their brains, but Homo erectus rewired themselves. They turned humanity's greatest threat into our greatest tool. That takes more than intelligence. It takes courage that borders on insanity. The first person to carry fire must have seemed mad to their peers, walking toward what everything else fled from, picking up what killed everything it touched. But that madness changed the world. That flame, stolen from nature and tamed by will, lit a path from caves to cities, from prey to predator, from animal to something more. The night Homo erectus conquered fire was the night humanity truly began. 1.8 million years ago, the edge of the known world. Somewhere in what we now call the Horn of Africa, a group of Homo erectus stands at the shoreline, watching waves they've never seen before. Behind them, the only continent humans have ever known. Ahead, the complete unknown. They could have stayed. Africa had been home to human ancestors for 5 million years. They knew its rhythms, its dangers, its hiding places. Every watering hole, every seasonal fruit, every predator's habit was encoded in generations of memory. But something in their eyes had changed. They weren't looking at the horizon anymore. They were looking beyond it. What makes a species abandon everything familiar for the unknown? It wasn't desperation. African Homo erectus were thriving. It wasn't an accident. The journey out of Africa required planning, cooperation, and incredible courage. It was something else, something that had never existed in any species before, curiosity that outweighed fear. The first crossing point was probably the Sinai Peninsula, that narrow bridge between Africa and Asia. Today, it's desert. Then it was a grassland corridor rich with game, but crossing it meant leaving humanity's cradle forever. The group that left, maybe 30 individuals, maybe 50, had no idea they were making history. They were just following food, seeking new territories, driven by something in their genes that whispered, "Go further." Within a mere 100,000 years, an evolutionary blink, Homo erectus had spread from Africa to Georgia to China to Indonesia. No species had ever colonized so much of Earth so quickly. They reached Dmanisi in Georgia by 1.8 million years ago, Java by 1.6 million years ago, China by 1.7 million years ago. Think about those distances. We're talking thousands of miles on foot with no maps, no roads, no idea what lay ahead. Through territories owned by cave lions, giant hyenas, saber-toothed cats, across deserts, over mountains, through forests unlike anything in Africa. Every mile was a choice to keep going rather than turn back. The Dmanisi site in Georgia tells us what these first pioneers faced. The 5 skulls found there, an elderly male, adult males and females, a teenager, suggests a family group. They weren't sending out scouts or warriors. Entire families were moving together, grandparents to infants, claiming new worlds. But here's what's remarkable. They didn't just survive outside Africa, they adapted. The Dmanisi population was smaller than African Homo erectus, probably an adaptation to colder climates. Asian populations developed different tool traditions. Island populations, like those on Java, became isolated and developed unique characteristics. They weren't just spreading, they were evolving. Recent discoveries suggest the journey was even more audacious than we thought. Homo erectus reached Flores in Indonesia, which required crossing the open ocean. They built rafts or boats. They navigated. They planned sea voyages with no guarantee of land on the other side. These weren't lucky accidents. This was exploration. The Great Escape from Africa wasn't a single event. It was wave after wave, generation after generation, always pushing further. When one group settled, the children looked at new horizons. When one territory was claimed, eyes turned to the next. In 100,000 years, Homo erectus did what Homo sapiens would later take 60,000 years to accomplish. They made Earth humanity's planet. They didn't know they were the first humans to see Asian sunrises, European winters, Indonesian rainforests. They just knew that beyond every horizon was possibility, and possibility was worth any risk. Dmanisi, Georgia, 1.8 million years ago. The first winter outside Africa, the wind cuts through the Caucasus Mountains like frozen knives. Snow, something no human ancestor has ever seen, falls from a grey sky. The temperature plummets to 20 degrees, and a group of Homo erectus, evolved for African heat, stands shivering in humanity's first true winter. They have no fur coats, no sewn clothing, no boots. Their tropical bodies, designed to shed heat, are suddenly their greatest enemy. Frostbite should have taken their fingers in hours. Hypothermia should have killed them in days. But they survived. Somehow, impossibly they survived. The fossils from Dmanisi tell us these weren't even cold-adapted humans. Their bodies were still essentially African, lean, long-limbed, built for running under savanna sun. They were as prepared for Georgian winter as you'd be for Antarctica in a t-shirt. So, how did they do it? Fire was part of the answer, but not all of it. You can't carry fire while hunting, can't sleep wrapped in flames. The real innovation was something we take for granted. They figured out clothing without sewing. The evidence is indirect but compelling. Homo erectus at Dmanisi hunted animals with thick winter pelts: deer, bears, wolves. The cut marks on bones show they weren't just taking meat. They were carefully removing hides in large pieces. They were making the world's first coats. Without needles, those wouldn't be invented for another 1.7 million years. They probably wrapped hides around their bodies, using sinew to tie them in place. Crude, yes. Effective? Effective enough to survive winters that would kill naked humans in hours. But clothing was just the beginning. They discovered the power of huddles, sleeping together, sharing body heat, creating human furnaces in cave shelters. They learned which caves held warmth, which faced away from prevailing winds. They discovered that fresh animal hides, still bloody and warm, could save a freezing child if wrapped quickly enough. The behavioral adaptations were even more crucial. They learned winter's rhythms: when to hunt midday, when temperatures peaked; when to gather wood before storms, not during; when to stay inside when wind chill could freeze exposed skin in minutes. They also discovered animal behavior changed in winter. Prey clustered near water sources that hadn't frozen. Predators became desperate and more dangerous. Food that was safe in summer, certain plants and mushrooms, became deadly when frozen. Every mistake taught a lesson. Every death educated the survivors. Every winter made them stronger. The children who survived those first winters outside Africa were different. Natural selection was working at hyperspeed. Those with slightly thicker skin, better fat distribution, more efficient metabolism, they lived to reproduce. Within maybe 50 generations, the Dmanisi population had begun adapting to the cold. But they never forgot they were African animals in a frozen world. The Dmanisi fossils show they suffered arthritis from cold, dental problems from their changed diet, shorter lifespans than their African cousins. Yet they stayed. They could have retreated to warmer lands. Instead, they chose to endure winters that their bodies weren't designed for, using intelligence to overcome evolution. Because beyond those mountains lay new worlds, and Homo erectus had decided that no amount of cold would stop them from claiming them. Ethiopia, 195 million years ago. A young Homo erectus picks up a stone, examines it from every angle, then does something no creature has ever done before. She doesn't just chip off a sharp edge. She sees the tool hidden inside the rock, and she knows exactly how to free it. This is the birth of the Herculean tradition, the moment tool-making became art. For 1 million years, early humans had made simple tools. Grab a rock, hit it with another rock, and use the sharp edge. Functional but crude, like using a broken bottle as a knife. It worked, but it wasn't elegant. The Herculean hand axe was different. It was planned, symmetrical, and beautiful. Picture a teardrop made of stone, perfectly balanced, sharp enough to shave with. Both faces worked to create not just an edge, but an entire cutting surface. The base fits perfectly in your palm. The weight distribution is ideal for chopping, cutting, or throwing. This wasn't an accident. This was engineering. Recent discoveries at Ethiopia's Melka Kunture pushed back the date of this innovation by 200,000 years. Nearly 2 million years ago, Homo erectus was already thinking 3 steps ahead. They'd examine a raw stone, rotate it in their minds, plan the sequence of strikes needed to create their vision, then execute perfectly. The cognitive leap required is staggering. It's the difference between following a recipe and inventing cuisine, between copying and creating, between reaction and imagination. But here's what really blows my mind. The Herculean tradition lasted 1.5 million years with barely any change. Generation after generation, from Africa to Asia to Europe, Homo erectus made essentially the same tools. The hand axe from 1.7 million years ago is virtually identical to one from 300,000 years ago. Was this stubborn conservatism, or had they achieved perfection? Modern experimental archaeologists have tried to improve on the Acheulean hand axe design. They can't. For its purpose, a multi-use tool that could skin game, chop wood, dig roots, and defend against predators, it was ideal. Homo erectus had solved stone tool technology so completely that innovation became unnecessary, but they didn't stop there. The Acheulean toolkit included cleavers for heavy chopping, scrapers for hide preparation, and awls for piercing. Each tool was standardized, like they were following blueprints passed down through generations. The 2023 discovery that Homo erectus used both simple Oldowan and complex Acheulean tools simultaneously reveals even more sophistication. They weren't locked into one technology. They chose their tools based on the task, quick and dirty for simple jobs, precision instruments for complex ones. This flexibility required abstract thinking. They had to evaluate situations, consider options, and select appropriate technology. It's the same cognitive process you use choosing between a hammer and a screwdriver. The tools also traveled. Acheulean hand axes made from specific stone sources have been found hundreds of miles from their origin. Either Homo erectus carried favorite tools on long journeys, or they maintained trade networks we're only beginning to understand. Most remarkably, teaching this technology required language of some kind. You can't create an Acheulean hand axe by just watching. The planning happens inside the mind. Someone had to communicate invisible concepts like force vectors and fracture patterns. The Acheulean revolution wasn't just about sharp rocks. It was about shared knowledge, standardized culture, and the birth of technology as a human birthright. Every smartphone in your pocket is a descendant of that first perfectly planned hand axe. Picture walking to a waterhole at dawn. You're carrying your baby, maybe holding a child's hand. Then you see them in the morning mist. 3 saber-toothed cats, muscles rippling beneath tawny fur, 7-inch fangs gleaming like ivory daggers. They see you too. This wasn't a nightmare. For Homo erectus, this was Tuesday. 1.5 million years ago, our ancestors shared Earth with monsters that would make modern predators look like house pets. Saber-toothed cats that could open their jaws 120 degrees. Giant hyenas that stood 4 feet at the shoulder. Cave lions are 25% larger than any living cat. Terror birds with beaks that could punch through skulls. And somehow, armed with nothing but sharp rocks and fire, Homo erectus didn't just survive, they thrived. The fossil evidence tells terrifying stories. At Dragon Bone Hill in China, Homo erectus bones show teeth marks from giant hyenas. Some skulls have puncture wounds perfectly matching saber-tooth fangs. These weren't always the hunters. Sometimes they were hunted, but here's what's remarkable. Over time, the predation evidence decreases. Early Homo erectus sites show frequent carnivore damage on human bones. Later sites, much less. They were learning, adapting, turning from prey to something predators feared. Fire was their first defense. No predator, no matter how fierce, would approach flame. Homo erectus learned to create fire perimeters around camps, to carry torches when traveling at dangerous times, to use smoke to clear caves before entering. But they went beyond defense. They studied their enemies. They learned that saber-toothed cats were ambush predators, not pursuit hunters. Stay in open ground, stay in groups, and you are safer. They discovered giant hyenas hunted in packs at dawn and dusk. Travel midday, post sentries, and risk dropped dramatically. They figured out that most predators feared healthy adult humans in groups. It was the young, old, and isolated who were vulnerable. So they restructured their entire society around protection. The old and young stayed in the center. Adults formed protective circles. No one traveled alone. The footprints at Illoret, Kenya, tell this story beautifully. 20 individuals walking together, children's prints in the middle, adults on the periphery. This wasn't casual travel. This was defensive formation, practiced and perfected over generations. They also learned to read the landscape for safety. Certain trees could be climbed to escape ground predators. Rocky outcrops provided defensive positions. Rivers and cliffs could channel predator approaches, making them predictable, but perhaps their greatest innovation was psychological. They learned to be scary. Modern chimps will charge predators in groups, screaming and throwing things. Homo erectus took this further. They had fire to wave, stones to throw accurately, spears to thrust, and most importantly, they could coordinate attacks through communication. A lone Homo erectus was lunch. 10 Homo erectus with torches and spears. Even a saber-toothed cat would think twice. The predator-prey relationship eventually flipped entirely. By 500,000 years ago, Homo erectus wasn't just avoiding predators. They were competing with them for kills, driving them from caves, possibly even hunting them. At Zhoukoudian in China, cave deposits show alternating layers. Sometimes cave bears, sometimes Homo erectus. They were fighting for prime real estate, and increasingly humans were winning. Living with giants taught Homo erectus vigilance, cooperation, and courage. Every day could be their last. Every shadow could hide death. Every noise required investigation, but they refused to live in fear. They turned a world of monsters into humanity's playground. Ileret, Kenya, 1.5 million years ago. The morning sun bakes the muddy shoreline of an ancient lake. A family group of Homo erectus walks across the wet sediment, their footprints pressing deep into mud that will preserve them for over 1 million years. These aren't just footprints, they are a photograph of human family dynamics frozen in stone. The tracks tell an incredible story. At least 20 individuals walking together. Adult prints on the outside, the protective perimeter. Smaller prints in the middle, adolescents. Tiny prints in the very center, children as young as 2. Their stride lengths show they were walking, not being carried. But here's what made researchers gasp. The prints show they were walking in coordinated formation, not scattered randomly, not trailing in a line. They moved as a unit, maintaining consistent spacing, matching speeds despite different leg lengths. This was a family that knew how to move together. The preservation is so perfect, you can see individual toe impressions. The weight distribution shows some adults were carrying heavy loads, probably tools, food, or water. One set of prints shows an irregular gait, suggesting injury or age. Yet this individual kept pace, helped by others. The children's tracks are particularly touching. They show the characteristic wandering of young ones, stepping sideways to look at something, occasional skip steps of excitement, but always returning to formation. Someone was watching them, calling them back, keeping them safe. Modern analysis reveals even more. The depth and spacing of prints indicate they were walking at about 1.7 men/per, a comfortable pace that even small children could maintain. They weren't fleeing, they weren't hunting, they were traveling, probably between seasonal camps. The footprints also reveal something profound about Homo erectus child rearing. Those tiny feet walking independently show that children weren't constantly carried like ape infants. They were expected to walk with the group from a very young age. This early independence would have been crucial for brain development and social learning, but independence didn't mean abandonment. The protective formation shows every child was watched, guarded, valued. The arrangement, adults outside, young inside, is identical to how elephants protect their calves, how wolves move their pups. It's a strategy that screams, "Our children are our future." Recent biomechanical analysis of the prints revealed something else amazing. The adults were moderating their natural walking speed to match the children's capabilities. They could have moved much faster alone. They chose to move at the speed of their slowest member. No one was left behind. The prints also showed gender cooperation based on size differences. Both males and females were present in the protective outer ring. This wasn't a hunting party of men or a gathering group of women. This was the whole family moving as one. The footprint site extends for over 40 meters, showing this wasn't a brief crossing. They maintained formation for distance, suggesting this was practiced behavior. They'd done this before many times. One set of prints breaks my heart. A very small child's footprints suddenly show longer strides. They were running to catch up. Next to them, an adult's prints showed steps. Someone noticed the child falling behind and slowed down to match their pace. That moment of compassion, preserved in mud for 1.5 million years, tells you everything about Homo erectus values. They weren't just walking together, they were living together, protecting together, raising the next generation together. Every step coordinated, every member valued, every child protected. This is the secret to their 2-million-year success. Not bigger brains or better tools, but something simpler. They never walked alone. Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, 1 million years ago. The temperature soars to 110 degrees. No rain has fallen in 8 months. The lake that once stretched to the horizon is now a cracked mosaic of dried mud. Every plant is dead or dormant. Every tree is leafless. This isn't climate change. This is Tuesday in the Pleistocene. New research from 2024 reveals something extraordinary. Homo erectus didn't just survive these hellish conditions, they thrived in them. While other species fled or died, our ancestors figured out how to live in an environment that would kill modern humans in days. The evidence comes from ancient soil samples that preserve a climate record like tree rings. During hyper-arid periods, rainfall dropped to less than 10 inches per year. That's Death Valley levels. But the Homo erectus tools and fossils don't disappear, they increase. How is that possible? They became water engineers. At Olorgesailie, archaeologists found evidence of something remarkable. Homo erectus were modifying the landscape to capture and hold water. Natural depressions were deepened. Rocks were arranged to channel rare rainfall into pools. They were creating artificial water holes, but that's just the beginning. They learned to read the desert's secret signals, which plants stored water in their roots, where animals dug for underground streams, how morning dew could be collected on specially positioned stones. They turned survival into science. The bones tell us their diet completely transformed during droughts. Instead of large game, they focused on drought-resistant species. Tortoises that could survive without water for months, lizards that got moisture from insects, birds' eggs that contained crucial liquids. They also discovered something game-changing: termites, high in protein and fat, available year-round, requiring only simple tools to harvest. Termite mounds became prehistoric convenience stores, reliable food sources when everything else failed. The tool evidence shows specialized adaptations. During wet periods, they made large hand axes for butchering big game. During droughts, the tools shift to small, precise implements for processing seeds, insects, and roots. They weren't just adapting, they were innovating in real time, but perhaps most remarkably, they learned to predict climate cycles. Sites show evidence of food storage. Caches of processed plants, dried meat, and tools buried during good times for retrieval during bad. They were planning for disasters years in advance. The social adaptations were equally crucial. During severe droughts, multiple family groups would converge on the few remaining water sources. Instead of fighting, evidence suggests they cooperated. Tool styles from different regions appear together. Cultural exchange accelerated during climate stress. They also developed what researchers call drought architecture. Shelters positioned to maximize shade during the day and retain heat at night, underground storage pits that used earth insulation to preserve food, windbreaks that reduced water loss from evaporation. The children's fossils from drought periods show something touching. Despite extreme stress, juvenile bones show continued growth. The adults were sacrificing their own nutrition to keep children fed. Even facing starvation, they invested in the future. One discovery stands out. A Homo erectus skull from a hyper-arid period shows dental wear from eating grass seeds, the same seeds that would later be domesticated as wheat and barley. Facing starvation, they discovered agriculture's raw materials 900,000 years before farming was invented. They didn't just endure the desert. They learned its language, adapted to its rhythms, and turned Earth's harshest environment into another conquered territory. When the climate finally shifted to wetter conditions, Homo erectus didn't celebrate relief. They prepared for the next drought, because they'd learned nature's most important lesson: good times don't last, but neither do bad ones. If you can survive both, you can survive forever. Listen, lean in close. 1.5 million years ago, around a fire in Africa, someone is trying to explain something vital, not with words as we know them, but with sounds, gestures, and expressions that carry meaning. The first human conversation has begun. Did Homo erectus have language? It's the question that keeps archaeologists awake at night. We can't fossilize words, can't excavate conversations, but the evidence is mounting that these ancient humans had something, maybe not language as we know it, but something more than animal calls. Let's start with the anatomy. The Turkana boy skeleton shows a spinal canal that could support the breathing control necessary for speech. The shape of Homo erectus skulls suggests a larynx positioned lower than apes, not as low as ours, but moving in that direction. They had the basic hardware, but hardware wasn't enough. Your dog has a larynx too, but Fido isn't giving TED Talks. The real question is cognitive capacity. And here's where things get interesting. Teaching someone to make an Acheulean hand axe is nearly impossible without some form of communication. Modern archaeologists have tried teaching stone tool making through pure demonstration. The failure rate is spectacular. You need to communicate concepts like strike here, but at this angle, with this much force, expecting this fracture pattern. That requires more than pointing and grunting. Researchers studying modern stone toolmakers found their brain activity during napping lights up language areas. Broca's region, associated with speech production, the same neural pathways that control complex toolmaking control language. If Homo erectus had one, they likely had both. But the strongest evidence comes from their lifestyle. They coordinated group hunts of dangerous game. They maintained fire through generations. They navigated to islands they couldn't see. They cared for injured members for years. Try doing any of that without communication. Daniel Everett, a linguist who studied language evolution, argues Homo erectus had what he calls proto-language. Perhaps 100 to 200 symbols combining gesture, sound, and expression. Not Shakespeare, but enough to convey danger, food there, help me, watch child. The footprints at Ilaret support this. 20 people maintaining formation while walking requires communication. Someone had to coordinate pace, direction, and positioning. Someone called out dangers. Someone kept children in line. They probably couldn't discuss abstract philosophy or compose poetry, but they could share practical information crucial for survival, where water flowed in drought years, which plants poisoned, how weather patterns preceded storms. Here's my favorite evidence. Homo erectus had regional tool traditions. Hand axes from Africa differ from Asian ones. That's culture, transmitted through teaching. And teaching complex skills requires some form of symbolic communication. They likely used what researchers call mimetic communication, acting out scenarios to convey meaning, pretending to stalk prey to plan hunts, miming illness to describe symptoms, using hands to show shapes and sizes. It's communication through theater. Modern humans still do this. Watch someone describe catching a fish. Their hands spread to show size, their body mimics the struggle. That's ancient communication surfacing through millions of years of evolution. The social evidence is compelling too. Homo erectus lived in groups of 30 to 50 individuals with complex relationships. They had to negotiate sharing, coordinate activities, resolve conflicts and maintain bonds. That's impossible without rich communication. They probably had names, not words perhaps, but unique sound signatures for individuals. They had to reference people not present, plan for future events, and recall past experiences. That requires symbols, even if primitive. We'll never hear a Homo erectus conversation, but the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. They had something more than chimps but less than us, something that lets them share knowledge, coordinate action, and build the first human culture. Flores, Indonesia, 900,000 years ago. The morning sun reveals an impossible sight. Homo erectus footprints on a beach that should not exist. This island has never been connected to the mainland. To reach it required crossing at least 19 miles of open ocean through treacherous currents that challenge modern boats. Yet here they stand, looking at virgin forests no human eyes have seen before. This wasn't an accident. These weren't lucky individuals clinging to tsunami debris. This was intentional seafaring by beings we vastly underestimated. The implications stagger the mind. To reach Flores required boats, not just floating logs, but constructed vessels capable of carrying families. It required navigation, understanding currents, reading weather, maintaining direction out of sight of land. It required planning, gathering supplies, organizing groups, accepting deadly risk for unknown reward. Most importantly, it required imagination, the ability to look at endless water and wonder what lay beyond. The evidence is undeniable. Homo erectus fossils and tools appear on Flores, Timor, and other Indonesian islands that were always separated by deep water channels. Even during ice ages, when sea levels dropped 400 feet, these islands remained isolated. The only way to reach them was by sea. Let that sink in. These ancient humans with brains smaller than ours built boats and sailed into the unknown 850,000 years before Columbus. But how? Bamboo grows abundantly in Indonesia, strong, buoyant, and naturally hollow. Lashing bamboo poles together with vines creates serviceable rafts. Modern experiments show such vessels can carry families and supplies across significant distances. The greater mystery is motivation. What drives a species to leave visible land for invisible possibilities? It wasn't desperation. Mainland populations were thriving. It wasn't an accident. Too many successful crossings to different islands. It was something magnificent, curiosity, overwhelming fear. Consider the first crossing. Someone had to convince others that risking everything to reach a distant smudge on the horizon was worthwhile. They had to organize construction, select crew, and gather supplies. This required sophisticated communication and social organization. The voyage itself would have been terrifying. These waters host sharks, saltwater crocodiles, and deadly currents. Storms arise without warning. Yet entire families made these journeys, including children and elderly members, evident in the fossil record. Once they reached Flores, new challenges emerged. The island hosted dwarf elephants, stegodon, giant rats, Komodo dragons, and no familiar food sources. Every plant is potentially poisonous. Every animal is unpredictable. Yet Homo erectus adapted and thrived. The tools found on Flores show something fascinating: technological regression. The sophisticated Acheulean hand axes of the mainland are absent. Instead, simple flake tools dominate. Why? Perhaps bamboo tools replaced stone for many purposes, or maybe isolation forced pragmatic simplification. The Flores population eventually gave rise to Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, who survived until 50,000 years ago. These meter-tall humans with grapefruit-sized brains were Homo erectus descendants, shaped by island evolution. Their existence proves Homo erectus colonization was successful long-term. But Flores wasn't unique. Similar evidence appears throughout Indonesia's islands. Each crossing required navigation skills, boat construction, and the courage to sail beyond the horizon. Homo erectus created humanity's first maritime culture. The implications for intelligence are profound. This wasn't instinctive behavior. No genetic program says build boat, sail east. This was learned, taught, and transmitted culture. It required abstract thinking, imagining unseen lands, planning, preparing for unknown challenges, faith, believing in possibilities beyond experience. Modern humans pride themselves on exploration, but Homo erectus reached islands we wouldn't colonize for another 900,000 years. They crossed waters we consider treacherous in boats we consider impossible. Picture a 5-year-old in Africa 1 million years ago. She sits cross-legged beside her mother, tiny fingers mimicking adult hands as they work. Not playing, learning, every movement absorbed, practiced, perfected. No classrooms, no teachers, just endless observation and imitation. This is how Homo erectus children became human. The fossil record reveals something remarkable about their childhood. Unlike apes, who mature quickly, Homo erectus children grow slowly, taking 12 to 14 years to reach adulthood. This extended childhood wasn't a weakness, it was their secret weapon. Think about what a Homo erectus child needed to learn. Which of 200 local plants were edible, how to track 50 different animals, where water flowed in drought years, how to make tools, control fire, build shelters, read, weather, avoid predators. The knowledge base was staggering. Modern hunter-gatherer children studied as proxies for ancient childhood, master adult skills through play and observation. By age 6, they can identify hundreds of plants. By 10, they're contributing significantly to food gathering. By adolescence, they're nearly fully competent adults. No formal education, just watching and doing. The small hand axes found at many sites tell this story. Too small for adult hands, too crude for serious work, but following the same manufacturing principles. These are practice pieces, children's attempts at copying adult technology. Each tiny tool represents hours of observation, trial, and error. But learning wasn't just technical. Homo erectus children absorbed complex social knowledge. Who could be trusted, how to share fairly, when to lead, when to follow, how to read emotions on faces barely visible in firelight. The burial evidence shows how precious children were. At sites across Africa and Asia, child burials receive equal or greater care than adults. Red ochre painting, tool offerings, protected positions. These weren't disposable offspring. They were investments in the future. Children's tooth development tells stories of survival and care. Enamel defects, called linear hyperplasias, mark periods of severe stress, illness, starvation, trauma. Many Homo erectus children show these marks but survive to adulthood. Someone nursed them through the crisis. Someone ensured they lived to carry knowledge forward. The footprints at Ileret include tiny prints of toddlers walking independently, not carried constantly like ape infants, but walking with the group. This early mobility was crucial for brain development, moving through landscapes, experiencing environments directly, building spatial intelligence that would define human cognition. Play was serious business. Modern forager children play hunting games that precisely mimic adult strategies. They build miniature shelters that follow adult architectural principles. Their games are rehearsals for survival. Homo erectus children likely did the same. The social learning was sophisticated. Children learned not just what to do, but who to learn from. Studies of modern foragers show children preferentially copy successful adults, prestigious individuals, and those similar to themselves. This selective learning accelerated cultural evolution. Language learning, whatever form their communication took, happened through immersion. No grammar books, no vocabulary lists, just endless exposure to adult communication, gradually decoding patterns and meaning through context and repetition. The extended childhood of Homo erectus created a unique learning environment. While young chimps become independent by age 5, Homo erectus children remain dependent into adolescence. This dependency wasn't a weakness. It was an opportunity. More time to learn, more knowledge to absorb, more skills to perfect. Archaeological evidence suggests apprenticeship systems. Certain tool-making sites show progressive skill development, crude attempts, improving techniques, eventual mastery. Children weren't just watching, they were being actively taught through guided practice. This investment in childhood education required tremendous resources, feeding children who couldn't fully provide for themselves, protecting them from predators, slowing group movement to accommodate them. But the payoff was huge, each generation more knowledgeable than the last. 400,000 years ago, the world turned hostile. Not gradually, but in sudden, vicious swings that would give climate scientists nightmares. Tropical warmth becomes Arctic cold in decades. Forests become deserts in a human lifetime. Everything Homo erectus knew about survival becomes obsolete. The marine isotope stage 11 interglacial period had been paradise. Warm, stable, predictable. Homo erectus populations exploded across 3 continents. Then, like a switch flipping, ice ages returned with vengeance. But this wasn't ordinary climate change, this was chaos. The evidence from deep ocean cores shows temperature swings of 10 degrees in single centuries, rainfall patterns reversing completely, ocean currents shutting down and restarting. The planet was having a breakdown, and Homo erectus was along for the ride. In Europe, populations that had thrived for millennia suddenly vanished. Entire regions abandoned, not gradually, but within single generations. The Homo erectus sites simply stop, like someone turned off the lights. Asia tells a different story. Populations contracted but persisted. They retreated to refugia, isolated pockets where local conditions remained survivable. Caves in China show continuous occupation through the worst climate swings, though population density crashed. But here's what's remarkable. They didn't just endure, they adapted. Tool technologies shifted dramatically. During cold periods, tools became more refined, specialized for processing every calorie from scarce resources. During warm periods, tools simplified as food became abundant. They were reading the climate and adjusting technology in real time. Dietary evidence shows extraordinary flexibility. Isotope analysis of teeth reveals diets shifting from meat-heavy during cold periods to plant-heavy during warm ones, from terrestrial foods to marine resources, from large game to insects. Whatever climate threw at them, they found a way to eat. Migration patterns went into overdrive. Populations that had been sedentary for generations suddenly became nomadic, following resources across continents, chasing survivable climates like surfers riding waves. The physical evolution accelerated too. Later, Homo erectus populations show increased brain size, more robust builds, and greater variation between regions. Climate stress was driving rapid evolutionary change. Natural selection on fast forward, but the psychological toll must have been crushing. Imagine your grandparents' stories of abundant games and predictable seasons becoming fairy tales. Your children are facing challenges you never imagined. Everything you knew, useless. Some populations developed what researchers call cultural buffering, maintaining traditions despite environmental change. The same tool styles, the same rituals, the same social structures, clinging to identity when everything else was chaos. Others went the opposite direction. Radical innovation, new technologies appearing rapidly, experimental tools, novel hunting strategies, throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. The climate instability created evolutionary pressure cookers. Populations isolated by ice sheets or rising seas evolved independently. When climate allowed reconnection, these divergent groups would meet, exchange genes and ideas, then separate again. This cycling of isolation and reconnection created a complex pattern of regional evolution. Asian Homo erectus became increasingly distinct from African populations. European groups developed unique adaptations. Island populations went their own way entirely. By 200,000 years ago, the climate had won, sort of. Homo erectus was fragmenting. Different populations evolve into different species. In Africa, they were becoming Homo sapiens. In Europe, Homo heidelbergensis, and eventually Neanderthals. In Asia, Denisovans and others. Climate change didn't kill Homo erectus. It shattered them into pieces, each evolving separately to face local challenges. The species that had conquered the world through unity was divided by climate into competing evolutionary experiments. Yet, in a way, this was victory. When one environment became hostile, some populations somewhere survived. When one adaptation failed, another succeeded. Homo erectus didn't beat climate change. They became it, fluid, adaptable, unstoppable. The enemy that should have destroyed them instead multiplied them into the diverse human species that would inherit the Earth. Java, Indonesia, 117,000 years ago. In the tropical forests of Ngandong, the last Homo erectus on Earth wakes up another morning, unaware they're living in humanity's final chapter of a 2-million-year story. They couldn't know they were the last. How could they? Their kind had walked this island for over 1 million years. Their ancestors had crossed oceans, survived ice ages, raised 1,000 generations. Extinction was something that happened to other species. But the world had changed, and Homo erectus couldn't change fast enough. The Ngandong population was already different from their ancestors. Isolated on Java, as sea levels rose and fell, they'd evolved unique features. Incredibly thick skulls, some nearly twice as thick as modern humans, massive brow ridges, brain sizes at the upper limit of Homo erectus range around 1/250 cm3. They were evolving, but in the wrong direction. The thick skulls might have been adapted to conflict. The Ngandong fossils show extraordinary levels of trauma. Healed fractures, weapon marks, evidence of violence far exceeding earlier Homo erectus sites. Were they fighting each other for dwindling resources, fighting new arrivals? We don't know. The environment was turning against them. The open woodlands they dominated for 1 million years were becoming dense rainforests. Their hunting strategies, perfected for open terrain, failed in jungle, where visibility was measured in meters, not miles. New species were arriving. Modern humans were spreading through Southeast Asia. Denisovans were likely present. Advanced humans with advanced technologies competing for the same resources. Homo erectus, with their million-year-old toolkit, couldn't compete. The tools tell a story of desperate conservatism. While humans elsewhere were developing blade technologies and projectile weapons, the Ngandong Homo erectus clung to the same basic tools their ancestors had used. The Acheulean hand axes that had conquered the world were now obsolete antiques. Disease might have been the final blow. New human species brought new pathogens. Populations isolated for millennia had no immunity to mainland diseases. What started as competition might have ended as plague. The fossil record suggests the end came quickly. The Ngandong sites show no gradual decline. One layer has Homo erectus fossils and tools, the next layer doesn't. They disappeared between one geological moment and the next. The last individual might have been a child watching their family die one by one from disease or starvation, or an elder remembering stories of when their people were numerous, wondering where everyone had gone, or a mother searching for food in a forest that no longer provided it. We'll never know their final moments, but we know their final message written in the positioning of the Ngandong fossils. The skulls were found together, arranged in ways suggesting deliberate placement, not random death sites, but possibly ritual deposits. Were the last Homo erectus trying to preserve something, creating a monument to their existence? Or were these the victims of the first genocide, their skulls collected as trophies by new human species? The dating of the Ngandong fossils to 117,000 to 108,000 years ago means Homo erectus almost certainly encountered modern humans. Our species had reached Southeast Asia by then. For perhaps a few thousand years, two human species that had diverged nearly 2 million years earlier stood face to face again. What did they see in each other? Did Homo erectus recognize the family resemblance? Did Homo sapiens see their own past in those heavy brows and thick skulls? Was there communication, trade, conflict, love? The genetic evidence suggests limited interaction. No clear Homo erectus DNA survives in modern populations. If there was interbreeding, it left no lasting trace. 2 million years of evolution had created a gap too wide to bridge. The last stand in Java wasn't dramatic. No final battle, no heroic last survivor, just a gradual fading as birth rates fell below death rates as territory shrank. As the world moved on without them, Homo erectus died as they had lived, quietly, persistently, without fanfare. The species that had lasted 2 million years ended not with a bang, but a whisper. Yet in their silence lies profound dignity. They'd carried the torch of humanity for 100,000 generations. They'd given rise to every human species that followed. Their innovations became our inheritance. After 2 million years of beating every odd, what force could possibly destroy Homo erectus? Not asteroids, not supervolcanoes, not ice ages. The answer is heartbreakingly simple. They succeeded too well to change. Think about it. For 2 million years, the same basic strategy worked. Make an Acheulean hand axe, hunt in groups, follow the herds, maintain the fire, raise the children. It worked in Africa, it worked in Asia, it worked in Europe, generation after generation, millennium after millennium. Why fix what isn't broken? But that's exactly what killed them. Their success became their prison. Dr. Seri Shipton's research in Arabia revealed something devastating. At the Safaka site, 190,000 years ago, Homo erectus sat next to a river full of stone, perfect for tool-making. Yet they walked miles to collect inferior rock from familiar sources. Even when innovation would have saved energy, they chose tradition. This is what Shipton calls the least effort strategy. Not laziness, but fatal efficiency. They'd optimized their lifestyle so perfectly that trying anything new seemed wasteful. Why experiment when the old ways work? Meanwhile, other human species were innovating like their lives depended on it, because they did. Homo sapiens, emerging in Africa, developed projectile weapons. Neanderthals created sophisticated hafted tools. Denisovans adapted to extreme environments. Each species was pushing boundaries, taking risks and failing forward. Homo erectus just kept making hand axes. The climate data shows the tragedy unfolding. Around 200,000 years ago, environmental variability increased dramatically. Not just change, but unpredictable change. Wet years followed by sudden droughts, forests appearing and disappearing, prey species migrating in new patterns. Every other human species responded with innovation. New tools for new challenges, new strategies for new environments, new social structures for new realities. Homo erectus responded with the same tools they'd always used. It's like watching someone trying to use a typewriter in the age of computers. Not because they are stupid, but because typewriters had worked perfectly for so long. Why would you need anything else? The fossil record shows their populations fragmenting, groups becoming isolated, gene flow stopping. Without innovation to bind them, without new ideas to share, each population became an island, and islands of tradition can't survive seas of change. The competition was devastating. When Homo sapiens arrived in Homo erectus territories, it wasn't a fair fight. Sapiens had throwing spears that killed from 30 yards. Erectus had thrusting spears that required touching distance. Sapiens had needles for tailored clothing. Erectus had rough hides. Sapiens had complex language. Erectus had something less. But perhaps the cruelest blow was demographic. Homo erectus reproduced slowly, investing heavily in each child. Homo sapiens reproduced faster, spreading risk across more offspring. In population competition, mathematics is destiny. The end wasn't extinction as much as dissolution. Some populations probably interbred with other species, their genes dissolving into other lineages. Others simply dwindled below sustainable numbers. The last ones, isolated on islands like Java, held on until there was nowhere left to hold. They didn't fail. They just stopped succeeding. After 2 million years, the world changed faster than they could, and the species that had conquered everything couldn't conquer change itself. Look at your hands, those fingers that can grip both hammers and violin bows. That thumb that opposes perfectly for tool use, the proportions, the flexibility, the strength. That's not your design, that's theirs. Homo erectus. Engineering perfection developed 2 million years ago, living on in you. We used to think Homo erectus vanished without genetic trace. We were wrong. Recent genomic studies have discovered ghost DNA in modern humans, genetic sequences that do not match Neanderthals or Denisovans, but clearly come from ancient mixing. Some scientists believe these ghosts are Homo erectus, whispering through our chromosomes. The evidence is strongest in African populations, while Europeans and Asians carry Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA from relatively recent mixing. Africans carry older signatures, genetic echoes from times when the human family tree was more bush than tree, with branches interweaving in ways we're only beginning to understand. Dr. Jean Tresser's groundbreaking research identified at least 2 ghost populations that contributed to modern human ancestry. One of these ghosts perfectly matches when and where we'd expect Homo erectus contributions. The timing, the geography, the genetic signatures, all pointing to our 2-million-year-old ancestors. But DNA is just the beginning. Their true legacy runs deeper. Every time you sweat to cool down instead of panting like a dog, you're using their innovation. That efficient cooling system that lets humans run marathons. Homo erectus invented it. Every other mammal overheats. We don't, because they figured out how to hack temperature regulation. Your upright spine, despite all the back pain it causes, is their gift. They paid the price in herniated discs and sciatica so you could have hands free to create civilization. Every time you stand, you're assuming a posture they perfected through millions of years of trial and error. The way your brain processes spatial information, creating mental maps, navigating by landmarks, remembering routes, that's Homo erectus software running on Homo sapiens hardware. They were the first global navigators. That GPS in your head, they coded the first version. Your children's long childhood is their invention too. Chimps mature in 5 years. You took 18. That extended dependency, that long learning period that lets humans absorb complex culture. Homo erectus started that trend. They turned childhood from a race to adulthood into an academy for humanity. Even human values echo from them. The compassion that makes us care for our elderly. The Dmanisi grandfather proved they had it first. The drive to explore beyond the horizon. They crossed oceans before we existed. The ability to cooperate in large groups. They walked in formation 1.5 million years ago. Modern human birth is difficult and dangerous because our babies have huge heads passing through bipedal pelvises. That's Homo erectus engineering. They started the brain expansion that makes human birth require assistance. Every midwife, every obstetrician is dealing with their evolutionary legacy. Your love of cooked food isn't just preference. It's an addiction to Homo erectus innovation. Our guts literally evolved smaller because they figured out fire-processed food. We can't properly digest raw diets anymore because they irreversibly changed our biology. When anthropologists study modern hunter-gatherers, they're seeing strategies Homo erectus developed: persistence hunting, seasonal rounds, central place foraging, division of labor. These aren't human universals by accident. They're human universals because Homo erectus proved they worked. We are not Homo sapiens standing alone. We are the sum of 2 million years of Homo erectus innovation wrapped in modern packaging. Their ghosts don't just haunt our DNA, they built the house it lives in. Here we are, the end of a 2 million year journey. But before you close this chapter, let me tell you why Homo erectus matters more today than ever. We live in an age of rapid change, technology evolving exponentially, climate shifting unpredictably, social structures transforming overnight. And we're scared. Scared we can't adapt fast enough, scared our children will inherit an unrecognizable world, scared that everything we know will become obsolete. Homo erectus faced all of this and survived it for 2 million years. They teach us that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about balance. They balanced innovation with tradition, ensuring new ideas didn't destroy proven wisdom. We rush to embrace every new technology, discarding centuries of knowledge. They tell us, keep what works, adapt what doesn't. Their care for the elderly reminds us that wisdom has value beyond productivity. In our youth-obsessed culture, we warehouse our elders in facilities, missing their knowledge, their perspective, their stories. The Dmanisi grandfather, toothless but treasured, asks us, what are we losing when we discard those who can no longer produce? They mastered climate change through flexibility, not resistance. When environments shifted, they didn't deny it or fight it. They adapted. They moved. They changed their strategies while maintaining their values. As our own climate transforms, they whisper, adapt or perish, but never lose who you are. Their family cohesion survived everything Earth could throw at them. The Illuret footprints, families walking together, protecting their young, supporting their weak, show us that isolation is death. In our age of digital connection, but physical loneliness, they remind us real survival happens together. They teach us patience, 2 million years of patience. We panic when quarterly earnings drop. They survived the ice ages. We stress about 5-year plans. They thrived for 100,000 generations. Maybe, just maybe, we need their long-term perspective. But their greatest lesson is in their ending. They survived everything except an inability to change when change was necessary. Their success became their prison. Their perfection became their tomb. They remind us that no strategy, no matter how successful, works forever. Are we making the same mistake? Have our institutions, our economies, our ways of thinking become too successful to abandon even when they're failing? Are we clinging to our own Herculean hand axes while the world demands new tools? Yet even in extinction, they succeeded. They gave rise to us. Every human alive carries their legacy. Every value we cherish, they pioneered. Every capability we possess, they developed. They didn't disappear, they transformed. As you face your own challenges, aging parents, changing careers, evolving world, remember Homo erectus. Remember that 2 million years of ancestors faced worse and survived. Remember that adaptation beats strength, that community beats isolation, that caring beats competing. Remember that you carry 2 million years of survival in your bones. Most of all, remember this: Homo erectus proved that with courage, compassion, and cooperation, a weak African ape could conquer the world. They did it with stone tools and fire. You have all their wisdom, plus 300,000 years of additional evolution. Whatever you're facing, whatever challenges await, you're equipped for it. Not because you're special, but because you're the heir to the greatest survival story ever told. 2 million years of your ancestors are standing behind you, whispering, "We survived so you could thrive. Now go prove us right." The story of Homo erectus isn't ancient history. It's your story. It's all of our stories. And it's far from over.